Bitcoin continues to break on down, most recently going down as low as $41,500. We can see that we have broken our downward trend line on more than one occasion. We had this drawn in multiple different ways, and every single time Bitcoin has broken it to the downside. So in today's video, I'm going to be going through the technical analysis on the 1 hour, 1 day, and 1 week's time frames. So let's roll that intro and get right down into it. Okay guys, so let's kick things off here on the hourly chart. This is Bitcoin paired up with USDT on the 1 hour Binance chart here. And of course, this is spot. So what's interesting is that obviously we had this move to the upside when we had the Bitcoin spot ETFs go live, where we saw a high of 48,969. This was kind of as expected, a little bit of FOMO on the back of the news of the Bitcoin spot ETFs going live. But as I've been talking about for quite some time, my expectation is a move to the downside. This was very much something that had to happen, because essentially the data in the charts was telling us that there isn't really a lot of momentum to the upside. The moves to the upside were fueled really only from the shrinkage of the supply on the exchanges and Tether printing. This essentially meant there was actually very little demand coming in for BTC on the moves to the upside pretty much for the last 6 months, meaning that as soon as we saw this fundamental news around a Bitcoin spot ETF, we were going to see a move to the downside. Now, I know this is not what people wanted to hear, but it is something that I felt everyone had to hear, and I've been banging on about it for weeks upon weeks. And so I'm glad to kind of be able to put that stuff behind me, and I can kind of move on to, things in the charts as we see them now going forward, because God, it was boring talking about the same thing over and over again. But hopefully I hit home with the messages. Now, as we come into our hourly chart here, we can go ahead and throw on our EMAs, right? So we can see that the price action is looking pretty bearish on the 1 hour time frame. Okay, we have moved down quite aggressively, and we can see here that the 50 EMA, that is the red line, set at $44,597, is lower than the 200 EMA, which is at $44,937. Now, we do have the 50 SMA, that is the yellow line, and this is looking to do a death cross on the 1 hour time frame with BTC, basically going down lower than the 200 EMA. At the moment, at the point of recording this video, that 50 SMA is set at $45,210. So it does look like a death cross is looming, and we are likely to see slippage back to the downside. Now, as I throw on smart money concepts here, you can really see the level of selling pressure that has mounted. We've got a couple of fair value gaps, and specifically around that 200 EMA, 50 EMA, and 50 SMA area also happen to coincide with equilibrium here. Now, ultimately, this is going to be a retracement area for us. We are going to be looking at the price of Bitcoin going up towards this range, in my opinion. However, I expect we'll probably move down a little bit more before we rally on up. So the expectations will be a small drop and then a continuation of this move back to the upside. Okay, this will then be met with heavy resistance and more selling pressure, in my opinion. Okay, nothing moves in straight lines, and as I've been kind of talking about for a while here, my expectations are a bit of a slow grind down towards $30,000. I think that is going to be the healthiest move for Bitcoin. If we move too rapidly and Bitcoin moves to $30,000 faster, then we might actually put ourselves in a worse situation further down the line. So what I'm really looking for here is a nice slow grind down towards $30,000 with the occasional bounce back to the upside, so we can actually bring down our stochastic RSIs on our monthly and weekly timeframes. This is critical if we want to have enough momentum for that next big bullish move to the upside, where we do target out new all-time highs, because believe it or not, I am super bullish on Bitcoin and on the crypto market. I do think new all-time highs are coming for Bitcoin and for many of those altcoins. We just need to be patient enough to actually see through some of the patterns and structures that we see within the charts. Now, of course, this is a moving target. Things may change and may adapt and may move a little bit more rapidly over time. But for the most part, my expectations are we move gradually down to $30,000 over the first quarter. We have a Bitcoin halving event. We probably don't do too much there, probably just an accumulative sideways ranging market. And then in Q3, Q4, we really start get going again with Bitcoin and with the crypto market, and we start to see rapid growth back to the upside, and we target out those new all-time highs. That isn't necessarily what you want to hear. It is going to be a slow process, but it is telling us that ultimately, I think we are going to be in a really strong position in the later parts of the year. Now, from our price action here, as we can kind of see, the expectations on this hourly chart are pretty interesting. I do expect us to kind of move down just a fraction more. It's possible that we rally up a bit before we have this drop, but I will be targeting out around that $40,500. I think that's going to be the area of interest. Maybe if we're lucky, we'll find support at about 41,000. Okay, so we look for this move to the downside, and then we rally on up. Now, this is because we actually have ourselves some 5-wave counts going on. So outside of your trend lines, your EMAs, your SMAs, and your smart money concepts, we do also have Elliott wave theory coming in here with a 5-wave move to the downside here. This is actually a wave 3. So we have a 5-wave move coming here, wave 2, wave 3, up for wave 4, come down towards that $41,000 to $40,500. That's there going to then give us our bouncing opportunity back to the upside towards equilibrium. And that's why I think this is the most likely scenario. Ultimately, we can see good areas of resistance right up here. Fair value gaps, equilibrium, EMAs, SMAs, all that's looking pretty prime there on our 1-hour chart. But we do have to see this 5th wave move to the downside. If we don't, then this is simply going to be just an ABC structure with a C wave that's overextended. And we'll know and we'll get confirmation of that by seeing anything higher than 45,606. That will basically break our structure here. So that is our 1-hour time frame. We're overbought on the stochastic RSI. Let's go ahead and bring this up for you so you can see we're overbought on that stochastic RSI. If we go ahead and bring in the divergence indicator, we can see that we've got plenty of room on the RSI, but there's no divergences being seen here at the moment. So that's also an interesting play. Outside of that, volume-wise, we can see that volumes are, of course, coming down a little bit here as we start to see a move back to the upside, right? So over the last few hours, we can see that price has been moving up while volume has been moving down. Let me go ahead and bring up the price action here. As you can kind of see, price has been going up, volume has been going down. This is a divergence, and this is going to basically mean that this move to the upside is not supported by any demand, and we are very little demand, and we're ultimately going to see a break to the downside. Again, we're just getting confirmation of what we've seen within the price action analysis through these other indicators as well. And obviously, as we started to see this move to the downside, volume was increasing. Now, what we have seen on the positive side is that volumes are decreasing overall as we've moved down. That shows weakness within this move to the downside, even though we have some of these smaller movements to the upside on the volume as really fueling us to the downside. Ultimately, this has led us into this impulsive breakdown, and obviously we'll be looking for a bit of a move to the upside. It is my opinion at this point in the game that essentially the $48,969 high is likely to hold. We're not likely to pierce up above that anytime soon. Okay, so that is our 1-hour time frame. Let's go ahead and move this to the daily. Now, the daily, of course, shows us with higher highs and higher lows. Now, obviously, we saw this break out to the upside here, so we're going to adjust that trend line, and we're just going to pull that in here, right? So we can see that we have the higher highs and we still have higher lows here. Now, this particular pattern is a continuation-based pattern, and to me, looks like we're pretty much there or thereabouts with finishing this one off. We can consider this potentially an expanding diagonal-based pattern, considering we were tracking a 5-wave structure anyway, and this will basically allow us to kind of say we've kind of finished off everything BTC-wise. And of course, a 5-wave move to the downside here would basically be the minimum expectation of a breakdown from this pattern. We bounce up a little bit, but we'll have to break down into a new lower low on our daily time frame to finish off that structure that we were just talking about on the hourly chart. So for Bitcoin on the daily, it's not looking necessarily as strong, but we are priming ourselves up for a bit of a bounce. We can see the RSI and the stochastic RSI on the corrective moves to the downside. We're not in an oversold position, so it's still very early game here for BTC. If we go ahead and take the stochastics off, throw on the divergences, you can see RSI is now below the midline. There's plenty of room to the downside, so it's not necessarily going to be a massive bounce when we see one. It's just going to be a small blip in the radar, I think, and then continuation to the downside. So again, not what people want to hear, but it is, I think, what people need to hear. Now, here we have the volume profiles on the daily chart. We can see the volumes were actually increasing just a little bit here as we started to see selling pressure, right? So we can see an increase here, a little bit on volume, just pushing us up towards that kind of FOMO area for the Bitcoin spot ETFs. But most recently, that high volume that we have seen has been pretty consistent on the red side. No major divergences. It's ever so slightly smaller, as we can see here, just a little bit as price is moving down, but it's not a significant drop that gets me thinking that we are immediately going to see a reversal and we can just recover from where we are. Ultimately, looking at it, I would expect a bit more moves to the downside. I don't think this is done just yet. Barely started, in fact. Take this out to the weekly, and obviously I have been talking about the CME launched, the Coinbase IPO, the futures ETF, and of course now the Bitcoin spot ETFs. All being kind of fundamental sell the news events. We went through this a number of different times over the last week or so, and we can finally see the weekly chart gone a bit red here on the Bitcoin spot ETF news. If we close red here, I think we're going to start to see a bit more coming on in. Now, obviously, our rejection areas, let me go ahead and just move that out of the way. The rejection area is right here. You can see that we failed to close above the 702 Fibonacci retracement area. This is $44,199. Right? This particular area has been heavy resistance for us. We've wicked up a little bit higher for sure, but we've been unable to close above this range. Right? So the bulls are going to be looking at that $44,200 close on the weekly time frame. Failure to do that, I think, just basically gears up the bears for a bit of a bearish run. Now, obviously, this is previous area of resistance as well and is below the 786 at $50,112. So everything on BTC is looking pretty bearish at the moment. We've got plenty of room on the stochastic RSI to the downside, and so there's not seeing any reason or rationale to think that we can bounce from here. With so much momentum now shifting to the downside with very little fundamental news to kind of keep the bulls kind of rallying up into Bitcoin. It is what it is at the end of the day, and unfortunately it has been a bit of a sell the news event. Now, when we take a look at our RSI is well overbought, and we are looking for corrections here still on the weekly time frame. This shows us big macro movements for BTC. Let's go ahead and just bring this out for a second and show you the last time that we were this overbought. The last time that we were this overbought, we were coming up into the Coinbase IPO, okay? And we can see here that this basically was correcting just beforehand. So the RSI was showing us some form of divergence, but we did have some bearish divergence getting flagged before we had the high on the Coinbase IPO and then a massive 53.93% drop. Now, we are heavily overbought. We're starting to see a little bit of turbulence here. And the RSI, of course, is correcting down as we went up into those new spot ETF highs. Now, if history is to repeat itself, then we'll be looking at a pretty big correction here for Bitcoin. Now, I'm hoping that we can really hold out at around the $30,000 BTC. If we can't, then we are going to be in a bit of an issue with Bitcoin, and specifically going down potentially lower. But for now, we can only really reflect on where the previous area supports are. So we'll focus in around 35 to 37 and 30 to $33,000 for now. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Bitcoin at the moment. If you're looking for a little bit more on my thoughts about what is going on with the Bitcoin spot ETFs, you should probably check out this video right here.